What if the reason why you're not feeling more joy in your life is because some part of you thinks that joy isn't actually safe? In this profound channeling conversation with Vagrein, a participant and Vagrein get deep into this topic as well as many other aspects of the human experience. They explore the root of resistance, spiritual bypassing, codependency, soul truth, and how to trust your joy again on a profound level without faking it. So let's dive into this deep conversation and enjoy this Vagrein video. What would you like to discuss today?
I would like to discuss what it is that I may not be seeing that is getting in the way of me feeling more joy.
So it is always, in some ways, resistance to that thing that one is saying they are wanting when they are asking, what is this blockage that is in this way? So ultimately, it is not necessarily that important to identify the specific blockage as it is to understand why is it you would not want to have more joy, even though this is what you are next calling into your experience. In other words, you do know that joy is beneficial to you. You do know that it is going to improve your life substantially, and it is ultimately the only route to getting everything else that you want, which, of course, at the point that you are joyful, are no longer necessary anyhow, because you only ever wanted them to arrive at that particular state of being. But there will be some aspect of you that is either not feeling deserving of the joy or is feeling otherwise that the joy in and of itself might be dangerous to you, or it might be dangerous to be in that state of comfort or that state of self-knowledge or that state of love on a more frequent basis. So in what ways do you, when you imagine your life as a joyful one, feel that there is some level of threat or potential for disaster or aspect of danger that comes into your mind?
I would say that the danger is that if I am joyful, I become a target somehow. Yeah, I become a target somehow, I think. I don't know, a target of what? I can't tell you.
We can't help.
Yeah.
When you perceive of someone who is joyful or who is in that state, in what ways do you target them?
I don't believe that they're really that joyful.
So you believe that they may be a fraud or they are pretending?
Yes, very much so.
This will be one of the fears that you have that is keeping you yourself from that state of joy. In other words, you are worried that people will think that you are faking it.
And maybe that's because I have faked it in the past, actually.
Yes, but also what is so wrong with the faking of it? Why is that something worth judging?
That's a great question. I don't feel any need to judge it right now that you say that. Yeah, it's just something that actually helps sometimes just to, yeah.
Well, as your emotions are feedback loops, one such as joy is both a response to the thoughts or the beliefs that you are holding, as well as a motor for the thoughts and the beliefs that you are holding. So accessing that emotion, even if it is not conditional upon the thoughts and beliefs one is currently having, is a way as well to modify the thoughts and beliefs that one is having. That is why we do tell you not to fake your joy, but to access it in certain ways, maybe the ways that feel easeful to you, as opposed to the ways that are more difficult to get to, so as to then facilitate or lubricate the thoughts and beliefs that are in correlation or compatible with that state of being. So that whole story of fake it till you make it does apply in many cases. Now, this is not the same as pasting over a hemorrhage with a Band-Aid, in that Of course, if you are having actual emotions that are trying to communicate with you and you attempt to, at every corner, apply joy to that so as not to feel those emotions and have them process and give you the wisdom and information that they are giving you so as to stimulate new desires, so as to have more expansion in your life, then of course that Band-Aid or that piece of Scotch tape will not be able to hold the dam together. You will then still have those emotions sitting underneath, waiting to come up to the surface. But we are not believing that this is the case for you, even if you do at times see this as the case around you. It can be considered even what is done in some spiritual circles of bypassing the actual what is the human experience, going to concepts of higher dimensions that are not entirely applicable to that human experience in order to escape from it, as opposed to learning these concepts to be able to apply them to that very human experience that, yes, is in its way extremely nuanced and does have different shades of chiaroscuro in it. Whereas, of course, at the higher levels, everything is all just light. So we do know that for you, there is a value within you that is called truth, that at times you do place higher in your set of priorities to that value of joy.
It is true. It is true that I value truth more than joy.
Then what you will have is whatever it is you have determined is truth about joy.
Beautiful. I have been asking myself the question recently of whether or not I'm spiritually bypassing, because sometimes I do believe, or sometimes I have the experience that something is happening, but I get a higher perspective and I don't feel like I'm bypassing the emotion as much as a higher level of consciousness is interceding and the emotion comes and goes very quickly. So you're suggesting I'm not bypassing, that I've created a relationship with my higher self where I'm not bypassing things all the time.
Well, yes, and this will depend on a case-to-case basis as to whether or not that seeking for the higher perspective is coming from a place of wanting to have relief from whatever emotion it is, or wanting to quickly understand the higher perspective information that is coming directly from that alarm having gone off in you, or from that emotion having been given to you. And as you become more masterful with this, you will find that your languaging even will change. It is not a question of, okay, this is an illusion, therefore it is unimportant. No, the emotion appears because it is in the illusion very important. Otherwise, it would not have been woven into that particular storyline. And when you give it this sort of attention in that, oh, look, the human is having this emotion, and this must mean there is something, this belief or this ability or this circumstance that is wanting attention, you then, from the higher perspective, the I, can allow the human to have the experience of this emotion so as to allow as well the wisdom that is coming from this experience to more readily and more easily be available to this being with their, yes, limitations of their brain function, etc. And this is not bypassing. Bypassing would be pretending that everything is okay because it is all an illusion.
So this is an interesting topic for me, because many years ago I had an experience where my I was without any identity as Susan.
Yes.
And so there was only life expressing itself. There was only joy. There was only a sense of bliss for the unfolding moment to moment. And so I think in some ways I've started to judge the illusion, because,
who could possibly judge the illusion?
well, there was no judgment in that moment.
Indeed.
Yeah. But when I came back to my identification as a person, it's almost as if that person believes that if I judge the illusion, it'll make it not real. And what you're saying is I'm kind of caught in a loop, is what you're saying. I'm
Well, you're not
in
caught in a loop, so to speak, too much, in that all that has occurred is you did get a taste of who you truly are, what you truly are, which does occur for many of you during your human lifetime, so as to then choose how to bring that back to the human experience. In your not knowing quite what to do with this experience, you have chosen for the moment to come back and say that that is better than this. But the only one who could possibly perceive of that being better than this is the same that is not in the this. You do have access to yourself, that higher aspect of you, not even access to, but are ultimately, and can live from that space, even if your human mind is not tethered to it. So it is difficult for humans to understand this, but even when you are identifying with the human, you are the higher self. If you can remember from the human perspective that the higher self does not have the judgment, it does release some of that tension. The higher self has chosen the exquisite expression of you as the human because it is the most beautiful thing it could possibly imagine to do with what it does not perceive of as time. Therefore, from this simple logical fact that your higher self has chosen to express as you can deduce the importance of being the human to the fullest with no judgments, because it is the most important aspect of what is going on for this particular level of your expansion, shall we say, which beyond the human perception of it is completely different anyway. So what we would like for humans to understand is really how precious they are as the human limited self in the journey of unfolding.
So to love the human.
Yes, the human is very worthy of that love because of its, what you perceive of only from the human perspective, imperfections.
Today I had this realization that I was grateful for the mirroring and the resistance that life offers me. It's like almost like without that, I would not have the motivation to go inside and to commune with that higher perspective, that higher sense of self. So it makes me question, is that the purpose for resistance? Is there another way to honor the human in a more graceful way that doesn't sometimes feel so difficult?
So yes, all experience is for the experience to be able to choose what to then do from that state of what you perceive of as free will. So in this case, it is to make you look inwards, and it is for the benefits of what you have received from it. Yes, there are also more easeful ways to navigate your human experience, but part of that navigation is learning throughout the human experience how to find your own natural easeful ways to it. You do not need to have resistance. You can be completely in flow state all the time. And what tends to happen in a human life is when you do decide that and come into an experiential living of that sort of existence, is that new challenges and catalysts will appear. New things for you to play with, new experiences, new people, new challenges, new offerings, and it will seem like a different level of the game. You will no longer, yes, be struggling quite as much with yourself, and you will then begin to struggle with the experience of life, or not struggle, but have the offering and opportunity to extract the learnings that you would like from each experience that appears within your field. There is also a period of straddling these two, because ultimately, anytime an experience does appear in your field, it is to show you more of yourself, not from the human perspective, but sometimes from the collective perspective, or sometimes from the soul perspective, to know more of yourself. So you may have health situations, you may have finance situations, you may have relationship situations, and of course, you do have all of these as well while you are struggling with yourself. But on that secondary level, they are seen more as, yes, even the illusion, or yes, even the smoke screen of simply existing to try to show you more of yourself. And then as you come into the understanding of each of these situations or circumstances, they do tend to dissolve a little bit faster. So the game gets faster when resistance is removed.
Yeah. So one of the things that you just said, which I want to get clarity. I have an understanding that when I view life, when I experience life from the perspective of pure awareness, the eternal part of me, I'm assuming that is my soul is then a reflection of that. And so is the pure awareness and my soul the same thing, or are they different?
So pure awareness can be, if you would like to place things on a hierarchy, what you're speaking of can be seen as more of a collective energy. Not even collective in terms of human, but collective in that the all that is. If you would like to talk about the purest, all that is simply is isness itself. The soul, or what is normally referred to as the soul, is already individuated. It has already made choices of what to eliminate from its focus so as to have a certain journey. Yes, it is higher in terms of its awareness of all that is manifest in your human existence. So it does know what color the car around the corner is going to be before it turns the corner, whereas you as a human perhaps do not. But it is not in all places at all times. It is very much connected to you specifically, and at times, yes, other incarnations. That can be a simultaneous soul incarnation in several places. This is something that can occur for some of you or with some of you, as there is that ability. But what it is more individuated than the pure all that is. And it is not even the soul that then goes to identify with the all that is. When we speak of higher self or soul, what we are speaking of is that part of you that is individuated and watching your life very closely at all times.
And that is why sometimes I am aware that something is aware.
Yes. Hi, quick pause. If you're loving this journey into joy, releasing resistance, soul embodiment, and how not to bypass your own humanity, then go ahead and like this video, subscribe to this channel, and tap the bell icon so you get many more videos just like this. The conversation continues now with diving into what is the sort of best spiritual practice to get the results that you're looking for, astrology as a permission slip, and whether or not you yourself are predestined to be a channel. And here's a question that I'd love for you to answer in the comments. When was some time that you faked joy? It could be a saucy answer if you like, and I can't wait to read them. Now back to the video.
Okay, that makes so much sense. I'm just orienting. I know there's not a
Yes.
hierarchy, but that's making sense for me. And so the Holy Spirit, so when I hear the voice from love, when I have seen the world through the non-physical eyes, sometimes I do see that corner coming around the corner. Is that that's the soul that's speaking to me, or is it, what is that? What is that allows me to know somebody's going to say something, car is going to come around the corner, that I need to pick a card? What is it that allows me
that
to...
is more of your non-physical self, which you can also call the soul. So if it is related to then the interaction with the human experience directly in the ways that you are saying, in that there's a knowing that the human has access to, that it is or can be the soul or any of the advisors or non-physical beings that you would not necessarily identify as yourself, but you would identify as your guides, etc., which are also in access to you as a human being. But your soul is simplified by describing it as that essence that you are channeling in your day-to-day experience. So while you have personality, which is a product of your past and your upbringing, etc., and while you have your brain function, which is a product of the physical connections within your brain and electrical connections that are there and the processing speed of the computer between your ears, etc. And while you do have your body, which is the manifest of cells in certain configuration and order so as to give you a functional vessel, all of these aspects are channeling that same energy, which would be considered your soul. This for as much as you recognize yourself when you get out of bed in the morning. Now, There may have been other times in which, like you said, you did not have access to so much of that personal aspect of it, or you had zoomed out to an even more expansive aspect of it where you could even witness that energy as, oh, look at that. That is one of billions. But for the most part, humans tend to stay tethered to what they consider to be their soul so as to be able to have that linear experience of being human. Yes, at times you will get messages also from what you would not consider directly yours, so to speak. Of course, the fact that it does speak to you does automatically make it something that you are perceiving in your perspective, which does then encompass it within your pinhole perspective of existence. Therefore, yes, creating it as something that is part of you.
And so one of the things that you said earlier was I could be processing things for the collective versus I could be processing my own experiences that have created that pinhole existence. And so does it make any difference whether it's mine or someone else's? Or should I just, if it's in my field and I'm feeling something, I should be present with it and let it move out? I mean, at some point you sort of, you know, you go, okay, well, I feel like I've worked on this so much. And yet this, for example, a pattern of rejection came up recently and it really felt alive. And yet I've worked on that so much. So yeah, at some point, am I doing work for the collective or have I just not done it correctly before?
So we will share with you an analogy that will help you to understand. First of all, it does not matter, no, whether it is yours or the collective's. The second thing we will say is the last time that it rained and you had an umbrella out and you managed to navigate the rain without getting too wet, did you come home and then expect it never to rain again?
No, of course not.
No, because rain is a natural aspect of the environment that you are in, and therefore you do know that it has its benefits. So even if you are, what you said, working on that aspect of rejection, it does not mean that you will not have those feelings again or more to look at in terms of that, because that is serving for certain things up until such point as you do not have any sort of energetic charge around rejection. You will feel the getting wet of it. Yes, you have carried an umbrella around with you and you've gotten better at putting on your Wellington boots when you are feeling that this is coming up. And yes, you have gotten better at understanding which bus stops have shelter and which do not, etc. But it does not mean it is going to stop raining. The rain is going to keep offering itself to existence as it is an aspect of it that is required. The simple difference is at some point you will not get as wet from those same energies. Rejection specifically, you will recognize not as something that is even rejection. You will simply recognize it as an incompatibility in the storyline of two people that absolutely does not touch you because you have not gotten wet from it anymore.
Yes,
So
I know.
all you're really being asked to do is find a better raincoat.
And what is that raincoat?
Well, it does not matter because you only find out through the experience. In other words, have you ever stood by the curb waiting for a bus when it has been raining and then a car comes by and splashes you with that puddle?
Mm-hmm.
Have you not paid far more attention to puddles from then on?
Mm-hmm.
So it is simply there to tell you, hey, look, if you stand here, you will get wet.
I see. I see. I see.
By the way, even getting wet in the rain is not a problem at some point. There are those who dance in the rain.
That's right. That's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah. Mm. Just taking a minute to digest that.
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, yes. So one of the things that I've been considering is whether or not I wanted to do something that's called a darkness retreat. The question I've been asking myself is, do I need to sit in a dark cave for 5 days, or can I just go out to the art studio and play with clay for 5 days? And whether or not one is more beneficial than the other. Yeah, so one seems to be a way of aligning myself with all that is through the vehicle of awareness and allowing the soul to mirror that. And going into the art studio and playing with clay seems to be a way of allowing myself to figure out when I'm not in flow and what that feels like. Um, and so I don't know what my question is other than in what way can joy be a teacher as much as things like meditation and and starving myself of like access to thoughts and senses. I don't know, that's not the right way to say it, but
May not be the right way to say it, but it is revealing in the way that you said it. So,
tell me about that.
yes, none of this is needed. You did use the word need. Neither are needed. Neither are more beneficial than the other, because ultimately, there is no goal. Unless you yourself are holding on to an idea of what the purpose is of any of this. Do you have an idea of what you are trying to achieve?
Yeah, I would like to be less encumbered, more loving, more in the moment.
Both can be permission slips, if you so choose, for that end, but you do not need either of them to unconditionally step into that energy right now.
Mm-hmm.
The stepping into that energy right now, yes, might also have with it what seems to be a slipping back into old patterns, but luckily, you do have an entire lifetime to experiment with all of your desires. If you decide to be more joyful, more loving, more present in the moment, and yes, get distracted, then that is fine. You do get in that then now moment when you realize the opportunity to then step back into that state of loving and joyful, etc. This is why also mantras exist at times, because people will choose a mantra that will simply remind them of their intention. You asked, what is the access point through joy? What is the access point through meditation? All of them are permission slips to feel a certain way. You have said you would like to feel joyful and loving, and therefore joy would be one of those directions. We would say go ahead and do that no matter where you decide to place your physical vessel, because it is absolutely non-consequential whether you are sitting in a dark room or playing with clay. Between the two of them, you are more excited about playing with clay. Now, the other truth is you do not need to choose between them. They are both piquing your interest, and you can experiment with both. You can attempt to have both of those experiences, and you'll come to the conclusion of which is more beneficial. See it as a science experiment if you so choose. Go ahead and schedule both into your calendar and make comparisons at the end. Again, neither of them will bring you to that end goal in and of themselves. That end goal will be reached only because you have chosen, either through that permission slip or beforehand, that that end goal is now simply who you are. You did also use the sentence, I would like to be. So you already know that future version of yourself is who you are going to be. And you are simply saying, I would like to be this, and I feel some resistance, and I would like the universe's permission to step into that new version of self that is awaiting me. You could also go take a bath right now and say, this water shall baptize me in this new version of self, and come out and be completely different.
It's true. It's true. It's true. So that vision of who I'm going to be, in some ways, that's part of it, right? It's like there's a sense that I know there's a way of being that really gets me excited. And then there's sometimes the frustration of not knowing what that is. So I'm going to ask you a question about astrology and what is written in the stars and how to use that as a blueprint to allow my exploration. to be illuminated, if at all? How important is that?
Well, it is not important, but again, it is a permission slip, and it does exist because as a collective, you have chosen it to be one of those permission slips that can be, at least in part, universally received.
Yes.
There are many systems that are related to your stars or related to your time of birth, etc., that do have within them information for you. This is not coincidental. It is by design by your collective to create these systems, to understand these systems, to have just enough doubt in them to retain your free will. In other words, you will not fall completely into astrology and think that everything is perfectly representative of you and that you have no free will and you are completely controlled by the stars, because there is some discrepancy and you do need to sift and sort as to what feels in resonance for you and what does not. So it is clever in that. But simultaneously, it does give you, in very many of the cases, enough information about yourself so that you can let go of limiting beliefs that are related only to you.
So it's more beneficial to look at the higher frequencies or the gifts or talents or higher expressions of those respective systems than the shadow, let's say. I feel
Yes,
like
there's no need to look at the shadow because humans are very aware of or experiencing, not necessarily aware of, their shadows through the experience of being human.
so focused on the higher expressions and
Yes, because there's no need to tell yourself what your limitations are. You are already quite aware of what you believe your limitations to be. The only reason why that would be highlighted for you is if you did not realize that they were beliefs in the first place. So if, for example, you are told by any sort of system, oh, look, because of this, that, and the other thing, the way you are built, etc., you have a predisposition to being lazy. If you then say, oh, well, I'm never going to achieve anything because I have this predisposition to be lazy, this can also be in genetics, by the way. You will then say, okay, I am limited because this is who I am. The question of who you are can never be determined by anyone except for you. Therefore, even if any system tells you you are lazy, you are this, you are that, in the shadow aspects, it is not there to tell you who you are. It is there to trigger discomfort in you, so much so as to you to say, no, I will show you, and bust that system, or at least tell that system what does not resonate with you. Because, of course, on the other side of the spectrum of laziness is productivity, or is that fierce courage towards moving towards one's goals. And so anyone who can be called lazy can simultaneously be called the other end of that energy.
I see. I see. One of the things that I liked about the book that was channeled was that you said that everybody is channeling. Now the person that I'm talking to today is getting out of the way and you are being channeled more unencumbredly. How do you know if you're meant to do that in your lifetime?
Well, you might not know if you are meant to do it. The only way is in terms of experimentation, and no one's meant to do anything, in theory. Everything is choice, even if to some of the people, they do not understand their choices or they are not feeling that they are 100% consciously on board with them. It is still choice to step into a calling or to step into what is next for you. That then becomes more and more evident as you experiment. So we are deep advocates for the experimentation and the collaboration with your human self. Desires, preferences are indications at all times as to signposts, as to directions that you're wanting to go in. So automatically, anyone who is interested in channeling is more predisposed to doing so than someone, say, who is not at all. However, there could be someone who is a truck driver or someone who has never opened a spiritual text in their life who suddenly has what could be considered a moment of illumination or reception of messages that has happened many times throughout your history as well. So, but we would say that right now in the collective, anyone who is interested in this sort of material is a way shower for others, and that will manifest in the way that is correct for them. So that would include you. It does not necessarily mean that you will be channeling or in a trance state, but it does mean that you already have predisposition and gifts available to you that, should you choose to experiment with, you would find would come online.
And so you're saying that there's not a predisposed blueprint when somebody comes into a human body, that really anything at all is possible.
Yes, most anything at all is possible. Of course, you do have those choices that you have made pre-incarnation as to how your physical vessel will work, as to who your parents will be, etc. In the terms of something like channeling or running an Olympic sprint, there are genetic predispositions that make that more easy in terms of something like what you are seeing occur now. But there is no reason why someone cannot run or channel, even if they are not at sort of the Olympic levels of that particular sport.
Okay. I think the last thing I just want to ask, so what is your world and your perception? Is codependency a thing? Like, I know that we are enmeshed with our energy, that we are in a web of consciousness and energy. And I'm kind of feeling like the answer is, the antidote to codependency is loving myself and putting myself first. Not in a self-serving way, but yeah. So what do you have to say about codependency, I guess is.
Codependency is outsourcing your state of being to another self as opposed to taking responsibility for it yourself. And yes, often this is a symptom of not loving oneself because you do not feel or have faith in yourself to be able to regulate your own emotional state of being, to be able to take enough space from that relationship in order to check in with yourself. And there is some level of fear of losing the relationship in the first place if you are not allowing that other person to control or be responsible for your emotional state of being. This is a back and forth that people often learn because indeed, when you are children, you are indeed dependent upon other selves for your survival. So maturing outside of a codependent relationship does mean becoming a full adult who is okay on their own. Now, that does not mean you will not get into relationship in the future. It just means that when you do, whenever you are triggered or whenever something is coming up, you will not necessarily go to the other person and ask them to fix that problem. You will first sit with yourself, find out what it is that is being triggered in you, and then after that, not ignore that other person, but from a state of self-sovereignty, be able to go and communicate to that other person, look, I have analyzed this situation. I've seen that there's this particular need or this particular desire or this particular situation that I'm wanting in our relationship. Therefore, I have looked at it and I've seen that there's a difference between us. Can we please sit down and have a conversation to understand how to make this more comfortable for both of us? It is not your job to make me feel good. It is not my job to make you feel good. Hopefully, by our interaction, we will both have more value in our lives rather than less in that particular experience, so as to increase the pleasure, increase the joy, increase the support that we have in our lives, as opposed to have detriment from it, because there's really no need for a relationship if it is making your life worse. But then if you are with someone else who is at or wanting and willing to mature to the same level as you may be able to sit down and have a conversation and say, look, these are the areas in which we are different, and these are the areas in which our emotions are triggered in certain ways. We're both responsible for our own emotions. They may come from our childhood. They may come from many other experiences. But how can we make life easier for each other and remain in love without building resentment, without building blame or shame or guilt or all of these other emotions that come up in a relationship? And if that other person is willing to, you can have that conversation and move towards a practical solution. This is not always the case, and codependent relationships are often there, yes, to show you where you need to be more dependent on yourself. So relationship is one of those major areas of growth that humans do thrust themselves into. We do suggest having relationships because of this, because of the acceleration they provide, but we cannot say that they are smooth sailing. In fact, they almost never are, because you are in soul contract with that being for your benefit to expand into new levels of self. We have time for one small question.
spiritual teachers. What is the necessity, if at all, of spiritual teachers versus learning to go inward and to commune with your own higher self?
So they're both one and the same in that the only reason why a spiritual teacher or a channel or anything ultimately exists is to have you stimulated into checking in with yourself. So
Mm.
spiritual teachers will offer you information, and ultimately the only reason why that information is offered is for you to decide whether or not to take it on as a truth or a belief that serves you more than the one that you had earlier.
Mm.
No one is the
Thank
authority above you.
Yes. Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you very much for your time today. And your wisdom. I really appreciate it.
We thank you, and it has been our pleasure to converse with you in this now moment. And with that, we leave you with the light and the love of 1,000 suns. Anai.
Mm.
If this conversation stirred something in you, if you feel changed, challenged, or anything at all, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave me a comment about anything that it's brought up for you. And don't forget to hit the notifications bell icon so that you will find out whenever a new Vagrein video is available for you. There's also an entire library here on YouTube of Vagrein videos, whether it's on joy, on your shadow, on truth, on relationships, on finance, on health, etc. So poke around and explore your next favorite video here as soon as you can, and I will see you again soon.